Where determination is, a way can be found. Did you know there's a man who has cut a stone so thinly that you can look through it and the whole world looks differently? He says, I used to look through the world differently as well. He's like, but I don't anymore. Let me tell you a story about how I used to see things differently. Hi guys, thanks for coming to my channel. This is where we're going to be looking at audiobooks and how we can improve what we can do and what we can learn from some of the best audiobooks in the world. And I want to let you in on a little secret. If you're not a fast reader, I'm not either. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be conquering that with audiobooks. We can listen to the audiobooks. I'll show you how, and if you have any questions, let me know. So let's get into this. I look forward to going on this journey with you. The hungrier one becomes, the clearer one's mind works, is how this chapter starts. Chapter 8, The Camel Trader of Babylon. So in this story, there is a man who hasn't eaten for a few days. He's just been shouted at by someone in the marketplace, and he finally gets to where he's going, to the marketplace, and then he meets somebody. That's Davasir, who's the camel trader of Babylon. So there's one guy that owes a lot of money to a lot of people. He's been shouted at, he's having a general terrible day. He says, and then when he gets to the marketplace, he bumps into the one guy he really doesn't want to bump into because he always makes him feel bad about owing him the money. He never just lets it go. So he bumps into him and he says, great, pay me back the money. And the guy says, look, I don't have any money, times are hard. He says, don't blame the times for your misfortune. He says, come with me. I want to tell you a story while I eat some food. This is when the guy who hasn't eaten for a couple of days starts to get excited. He starts to think, brilliant, I'm going to have some food here. He goes into the food hall, and I thought this was hilarious. He basically orders a massive mutton leg of lamb for him with vegetables, all that kind of stuff. And then he asks the servant to bring his friend, who hasn't eaten for a couple of days, some water, but make sure it's cooled because the day is hot. Then he announces, I'm going to tell you a story, and everyone gathers round with their food, and this guy is still hungry and has to listen to this story. And he thinks, God, is he going to make me listen to this story, and all I want is just to have some food? So Davasir says, did anybody know that I used to be a slave in Syria? He tells a story about how he used to work for his father, he was a free man, but then because he realised that he could pay later for things, he started to delay payments. He let his wife, who he should have been paying for things for, leave the family home and go back to her father. And the debts piled up. He couldn't pay his money, he couldn't face his debts, and before long, he left the city, leaving his debts, leaving the friends who he'd borrowed money from, leaving the gold lenders who he'd borrowed money from, all wanting and all disappointed. He then fell in with a bad crowd, but he didn't see how far he'd fallen. At this point, he then gets arrested. He gets arrested for stealing, and this is when he's sold as a slave. So now he's a slave, and he still thinks it's a bit of a joke, until the guy that's now bought him brings him in front of his 4 wives and says, we're going to use this guy as your new eunuch. So he's going to take away, some of his self. And this is where he starts to think, oh my God, this is not a joke. I need to, do something here. And one of the wives luckily says to him, well, I could do with a camel tamer. Can you look after camels? He says, yeah, I can look after camels. I can feed them, make them walk, whatever you want. Then once the lady says, okay, you can be my camel trader, he then says to her, look, I just want to let you know, I'm actually a free man, and I wasn't always a slave. And she says, how can you say this? And you've allowed yourself to be taken as a slave. She's like, do you have the soul of a free man or a slave? This comment sits him down. He's not really happy with this, and he has to ponder. Then after a while, she sees that he's not sat with the other slaves. And she says, why do you sit alone? And he says, well, I'm thinking about what you just said, and I don't have the soul of a slave, so I need to sit apart because I am different. She says, well, I'm different as well. And this is where they bond. So he starts pondering on this, and he realises that they're different. The next step is she invites him, after a couple of trips and they've got along, to go on a trip with her to her mother, who's sick. Once they get there, she says, look, you can escape with the camels. I'll say that you left when I wasn't looking, and you can go, but you need to repay your debts. You need to have the soul of a free man, which is where you say that you can do things. You can do it. And you just need to go to the people that you owe money to and tell them that you will pay them back every penny. Face your debts. Face the things that are scaring you. Take control and essentially engage that soul of the free man. He says to her, great, yeah, okay. So she says, look, you can escape while nobody's looking. He says, okay, great, you come with me. And she's like, no, You need to go and face your debts. I'm actually okay here. Don't worry about me. You go and do what you need to do. He takes the camels, goes through the desert. He almost gives up, and apparently he's run out of food, run out of water. And at the moment when he's about to give up, he asks himself, do I have the soul of a slave or the soul of a free man? He says, the soul of a free man. And he carries on. He makes it to Babylon. And this is where he goes to all the people that he's lent money to. He says, look, I don't have the money, but I will repay you. I am determined. Every single penny. This is where he starts to ask himself questions and says, I'm going to face my debts. I'm going to get my wife back. I'm going to take control of my life. So when they sit down in the food hall, he says, did you know there's a man who has cut a stone so thinly that you can look through it and the whole world looks differently? This is when the guy who's hungry says, okay. He says, I used to look through the world differently as well. He's like, but I don't anymore. Let me tell you a story about how I used to see things differently. Fast forward to the end of the story, and this is where he says to him, look, do you see things differently now? It's by facing the things that scare you that can make you the strongest. It's by facing the debts, facing the things, blah, blah, blah. And he says, now do you see things differently? Are you looking through the stone that is making everything seem different to what it actually is? He says his debts were his enemies, but the men that he owed the money to were his friends. So he was going to go to his friends and tell them that he wanted to repay the money. He says the soul of a free man looks at problems as obstacles and things to solve, puzzles to fix and puzzles to solve. Whereas the soul of a slave looks at things as obstacles to overcome. How can I? It's not possible. All that kind of stuff. Davasir looks at the guy who's hungry and says, can you now see things in a different light? And he stands up and he says, yes, I can see things. I will take control of my debts and I will find my way back to freedom. Now, one point that this chapter leaves us with is where determination is, a way will always be found. He goes and sees all the people that he owes money to. A couple shouted at him, a couple said okay, and a couple offered to help him do this. He says that now he could repay his debts, he could feel like he was an honourable man among men. This is when Davasir says, now, bring me some food, I'm going to eat with my friend. And they eat, and this is where the motivation comes to change. Where determination is, a way can be found.
Hi guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share. If you want to subscribe, that'd be fantastic. And let me know what you think about this chapter review. I'll be uploading tomorrow at the same time, 6 PM. Let me know what you think and have a great damn day.